My name is Elena Marlowe, and at 28, I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood the rules, the hierarchy, the subtle lines of loyalty and betrayal that ran through our family business, Marlowe Industries, a company my grandfather built from scratch and that had become the crown jewel of our city. I was wrong. Completely wrong. It all started on a Tuesday, the kind of morning that seems ordinary until you realize nothing about your life is ordinary anymore. I had arrived at the Marlowe headquarters for our weekly strategy meeting, expecting the usual review of quarterly profits and expansion plans. Instead, I was met with an unfamiliar tension in the air, a quiet that spoke louder than words. My father, Richard Marlowe, sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid, eyes cold. My stepmother, Vivian, perched elegantly across from him, radiating that calm smile that always felt like a shield. And my older brother, Derek, leaned back in his chair, pretending to scroll through his tablet, but I knew him too well. He was always watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I dropped my folder of reports onto the table, expecting the usual nods and murmurs of approval. But instead, I was met with silence. "Elena, we need to discuss some changes," my father said finally, voice sharp and deliberate. I frowned. Changes? What kind of changes? Vivian leaned forward, her hands folded on the polished wood. "The board believes it's time for a new direction. Someone with more experience." I blinked. "More experience than me? I've been leading the expansion for over a year." "Yes," Derek interrupted smoothly, "but experience isn't just about numbers. It's about connections, strategy. And you, Elena, have been absent when it mattered." Absent. The word hit me like a blow. I opened my mouth to protest, to argue, but my father's cold gaze stopped me. "You'll still have a position, but your influence will be limited for now," he said. Limited. As if I were a placeholder, a token, a girl to be tolerated until someone qualified could take over. I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to stay calm. That's when Vivian smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made my stomach twist. "We just want what's best for the company, Elena," she said softly, but the words were poison. I left the meeting without another word, feeling the walls of the Marlowe legacy closing in around me. That's when I noticed the emails on my phone, unread, from an address I didn't recognize. "I know what they're hiding. Meet me tonight. Trust no one." The message was brief, cryptic, and terrifyingly precise. I didn't even hesitate. That night, I drove across the city to a quiet cafe at the edge of the river. There, a man in his 40s waited, Mr. Alcott, my grandfather's former legal counsel. His presence was calm, but his eyes betrayed urgency. He slid a thick envelope toward me. "Your grandfather left more than just a company for you. He left secrets. And the people around you, they don't want you to know." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were documents, photographs, and a series of letters revealing hidden partnerships, off-the-books deals, and contracts my father had kept secret. It was a carefully woven web, a conspiracy that had been building for years, and I had walked right into the center of it without knowing. "The board, your father, Derek, they've been covering something crucial," Mr. Alcott said quietly. "If you don't act, they'll bury it. And you." I stared at the pages, heart pounding. My father wasn't just pushing me out of leadership. He was hiding a truth that could change everything, our family, our company, even my own future. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with the documents spread across my apartment floor, piecing together the patterns, the lies, the manipulations. It became clear. I had a choice. Run. Hide. Pretend none of this mattered. Or step into the shadows, uncover the conspiracies, and claim control of my own life. I didn't hesitate. I was done being the pawn. And I was about to play the game no one expected. The next morning, I returned to Marlowe Industries with a new sense of purpose. I was no longer just the daughter everyone underestimated. I was a detective in my own family, and every smile, every word, every file now had weight. I started small, quietly observing. Who among the staff seemed overly friendly? who glanced at documents with too much care, as if hiding something. My eyes caught everything. Deep down, I knew someone inside could help me. And then he appeared. Michael Renner, a young analyst in accounting I had barely worked with before. His gaze lingered on me, cautious but not hostile. There was knowledge in his eyes, something he couldn't openly share. "Elena," he whispered in the empty corridor, "if you really want the truth, look in your father's safe. But be careful. A safe. My father had always considered it impenetrable, the keys locked securely in his own pocket. Michael showed me a discreet way to access it without raising suspicion. That evening, I stayed late, waiting for the building to empty. My heart pounded as I approached the massive wooden safe in my father's office. The lock clicked open under Michael's guidance, revealing a hidden world I had never imagined. Shadow contracts, agreements with unknown investors, letters where my father discussed how to minimize my influence in the company. Everything was there. The real plan to remove me from the business, hidden income streams, even the names of employees secretly working against me. Anger surged through me, mixed with adrenaline. At last, I had evidence. At last, I could fight back. And then I heard footsteps. I barely had time to shove the documents aside when the office door opened. Derek stood there, that infuriating smile on his face that screamed challenge more than greeting. "What are you doing, Elena?" he asked, voice calm but eyes sharp. I swallowed hard. "Nothing that concerns you, Derek." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Really? Because it looks like you're poking around where you don't belong." I felt my hands tremble, but I refused to show fear. "I'm finding the truth. Something you've all been trying to hide for years." Derek chuckled softly. "Truth? You think you can handle the truth? You're playing a dangerous game." I leaned forward, my voice icy. "I've already lost control of the company once this week. I can't afford to lose again. Not to you. Not to Dad. Not to Vivian." He studied me for a moment, then smirked. "Interesting. Maybe that's why you'll make a good ally, or a very useful enemy." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and muttered something about a board meeting scheduled for the next day. His eyes flicked back to me, and I knew he was already planning his moves. Every smile, every pause, every glance, it was a game. And I had just entered the arena. I gathered the papers from the safe, hiding them in my bag. The room felt smaller now, heavier, as if the walls themselves were aware of the secrets I carried. That night, I met Michael outside the building. "Did he see anything?" I asked. "No," he said. "But he'll suspect. That's why you need allies. And one of them may surprise you." I frowned. "Who?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. "Your father's executive assistant, Claire. She's been quietly documenting everything for months. She trusts you, but not everyone else does." Claire. The woman who moved like a shadow through the company, always present but never noticed. She could be my key, or my biggest risk. For the first time since I uncovered the safe, I felt the weight of the battle ahead. This wasn't just about corporate control anymore. This was about survival, navigating a labyrinth of lies, half-truths, and dangerous family secrets. And somewhere deep inside, I realized something terrifying. The more I uncovered, the less I could trust anyone, even those closest to me. The next day, the board meeting would begin. And by nightfall, nothing in Marlowe Industries, or my family, would ever be the same. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and cold ambition. I stepped inside with a folder of evidence pressed tightly under my arm, every heartbeat echoing in my ears. The room was filled with the usual faces, executives who nodded too eagerly at my father, colleagues who whispered behind hands, and Derek, leaning casually against the table, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Good morning," I said, voice calm, betraying none of the tension coiling inside me. "I'd like to discuss the company's direction." Richard Marlowe, my father, arched an eyebrow. "Elena, you're here to observe, not decide." I didn't flinch. "I'm here to present information that affects every decision this board makes." Whispers erupted around the table. Derek's grin faltered slightly. "Go on. he said, voice sharp now, a subtle edge betraying his confidence. I laid the folder on the table. These are documents from the last 18 months that none of you have been entirely transparent about. Contracts, investments, off-the-books agreements. All of it. The room froze. Vivian's lips parted in shock, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. My father's hands tightened around his chair, knuckles white. And Derek, he leaned forward, eyes narrowing. I glanced around, locking eyes with Claire, the executive assistant Michael had warned me about. She gave a barely perceptible nod, the kind that said, "I've got your back." I continued. I discovered a series of agreements that redistribute company assets without board approval. Decisions that could have eliminated my influence entirely. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Finally, Derek spoke, voice low, controlled. Elena, do you really think this changes anything? You weren't supposed to see these. That's exactly why it matters, I shot back. You've all been playing a game, manipulating shares, controlling narrative, hiding profits. I have proof, and it's just the beginning. Claire stepped forward, placing a stack of her own documents next to mine. I've been documenting irregularities for months. My grandfather trusted me to protect the company's integrity. I believe Elena should have full access to this. Murmurs swept the room. Some board members exchanged anxious glances. Others stiffened, realizing the stakes had shifted dramatically. Richard's face darkened. Elena, this is reckless. You have no authority to— Yes, I do, I interrupted firmly. Because my grandfather left instructions, confidential communications, and an amended succession plan that has never been implemented. And I intend to enforce it. Derek slammed his hand onto the table. You think you can intimidate us with paperwork? This is our family, our business. Our family, or your version of it? I countered, letting the anger in my voice slice through the room. You've been protecting your interests, manipulating assets, and planning to cut me out. You've forgotten that loyalty isn't inherited, it's earned. And I'm done waiting. The tension was electric. For a moment, I thought the walls themselves would crack under the weight of the confrontation. Then Claire whispered quietly in my ear, some of the board members are ready to vote in your favor, but they need reassurance you can lead. I met her gaze. Then it's time they see I can. Over the next hour, we presented evidence, connected the dots, and revealed patterns of deception that went beyond simple business maneuvering. Every paper, every email, every hidden contract we unveiled chipped away at the power my father and Derek had wielded. By the end, the room was tense, fractured, but listening. The board members were no longer blindly following Richard. They were considering reality, and reality had shifted irrevocably. After the meeting, Claire pulled me aside. You need allies outside the company too, she said. There are investors, partners, even clients who were deceived. They will stand with you once they see the truth. I nodded. Then we make our move carefully, step by step, shadow by shadow. That night, I returned home to my apartment, documents spread across the floor like a battlefield. I realized just how deeply the family's schemes ran. Not only my father and Derek, but Vivian, and others I had trusted, were pieces in a game I had barely begun to understand. Yet, for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't alone. I had Claire. I had Michael. And soon, others would see the truth and stand with me. But danger was closing in faster than I anticipated. I could feel it in the small, deliberate ways my father watched me during meetings, the subtle emails Derek sent late at night, and Vivian's quiet manipulations behind closed doors. The next step was clear. I needed to secure my position within the company, expose the conspiracies, and prepare for the confrontation that would determine not just the business, but the future of my family and my own survival. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this battle would demand more than strategy or evidence. It would demand courage, cunning, and the willingness to confront the very people I once loved. The game had begun, and I was no longer a pawn. The morning of the final board session arrived like a storm on the horizon, thick clouds of tension and anticipation swirling above Marlowe Industries. I arrived early, clutching my folder of evidence, and my heartbeat thrummed like a war drum. Today, everything would change. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was electric. My father sat at the head of the table, trying to mask unease with a composed expression. Derek lounged in his chair, overly confident, yet there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Vivian's calm smile felt sharper than ever, a mask hiding fear she thought I wouldn't see. I placed the folder on the table. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady. "We have some truths to discuss." Richard Marlowe's lips pressed into a thin line. "Elena, this is not the place." "It's the only place," I interrupted. "Everything I'm about to present affects this company, its shareholders, and the people who have been deceived. Your manipulations end today." A hush fell over the room. I laid out every document, every email, every hidden contract. Board members shifted in their seats, glancing at each other, whispering quietly. Derek's jaw tightened. Vivian's eyes flickered toward my father, searching for reassurance. But there was none. Then Claire stepped forward. "I've verified every document. I've witnessed these irregularities for months, and it's time the company knows the truth." Michael, standing near the door, held up the final piece, a sealed letter from my grandfather, dictating an amendment to the succession plan and outlining his intentions for me to lead the company. The letter confirmed that my father had intentionally suppressed it. The room froze. Even Richard couldn't speak. "You've betrayed not just me, but this company," I said softly, locking eyes with him. "You tried to erase my role, hide the truth, and manipulate those who trusted you. That ends today." Derek leaned back, smirking nervously. "You think a few papers change anything?" I opened the letter. "I think they change everything." One by one, I presented the evidence, exposing secret deals, manipulated finances, and alliances my father and Derek had formed to push me out. The board watched in stunned silence, realizing the depth of deception and the consequences it carried. Finally, the lead board member spoke. "The evidence is overwhelming. Elena Marlowe, as per your grandfather's amended instructions and verified documentation, you are the rightful leader of Marlowe Industries. All previous attempts to diminish your authority are null and void." The room erupted into murmurs. Some board members nodded in agreement, others whispered anxiously to colleagues. Derek's smirk faltered, then disappeared entirely. Vivian's smile froze, replaced with the realization that her control was slipping. I turned to the board. "I am committed to transparency, integrity, and honoring my grandfather's vision. Those who wish to continue manipulating this company will be held accountable. Those who align with the truth will have a future here." Richard's face was a mixture of anger and defeat. "Elena, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You had your chance."
You chose de say.
The vote was swift. Every board member in favor of my leadership raised their hand. Not a single dissenting vote. The power that had been hidden, suppressed, and stolen was finally restored. After the meeting, I walked through the halls of Marlowe Industries, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. Employees I had never truly known whispered their congratulations. Allies I hadn't yet trusted approached me cautiously. And somewhere deep inside, I realized that the battle for control had also been a battle for my self-respect. That evening, as I stood in my grandfather's old office, looking out over the city he had dreamed of transforming, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The storm was over. The shadows of deceit had been revealed, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. Michael and Claire joined me quietly. "You did it," Claire said. I smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. "We did it. And now we rebuild." For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I was no longer a pawn in their games. I was the rightful leader of my family's legacy, and nothing could take that away. The Marlowe empire would continue, but under my watch. Transparent, fair, and guided by the vision of the man who had started it all. I turned back to the office, the city lights reflecting in the glass, and whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning."